LiberalViewer presents.
So when President Barack Obama made an impromptu visit to the White House press room at the end of last week, his 17 minutes of remarks were a pretty powerful commentary on the state of race in America, unique coming from the first African-American president, and in most of the media, Obama's remarks were generally well received, except of course on Fox News, where Fox News anchor Gregg Jarrett and Fox News digital politics editor Chris Stirewalt got together to misrepresent both what President Obama said and the facts in a segment that began with the cheap criticism setting the tone in this clip.
Stunning remarks from the President of the United States just a few minutes ago, Mr. Obama, talking about the Trayvon Martin case in Florida and suggesting that the jury had actually, this is how our system works, he said. He expressed sympathy for the family of Trayvon Martin conspicuously. No remarks about the Zimmerman family.
Now, I don't think the Zimmerman family has really suffered the loss that Trayvon Martin's family suffered, but the real dishonesty came when Fox News tried to persuade viewers that it was President Obama who injected the issue of race into the Trayvon Martin case, with Fox News anchor Gregg Jarrett misrepresenting the views of both the prosecutor in the case and, worse, Trayvon Martin's mother in this clip.
You know, when the mother of Trayvon Martin says, you know, this is not about race, when the prosecutor literally argues in front of the jury during closing argument that this case has nothing to do with race, then one wonders what motivates the president to elevate that issue.
Now, what one really wonders is how Fox News anchor Gregg Jarrett can say there that the prosecutor argued the case had nothing to do with race when, less than a week earlier, the afternoon before the verdict, Gregg Jarrett summarized the same prosecutor's argument like this.
John Guy, who again delivered the rebuttal closing argument for the prosecution, said to the jury, this is not about race, and then arguably he introduced race.
I guess how Gregg Jarrett spins it depends on who he's trying to smear today, and even worse was the way he presumed to speak for the mother of Trayvon Martin, Sabrina Fulton, claiming she didn't think race was an issue in the case when the night before Sabrina Fulton herself appeared with CNN's Anderson Cooper, where she responded to a clip of one of the jurors in the case saying race was not an issue like this.
I think that's a joke because he clearly said in the 911 calls that it was a black teenager, an African-American teenager. So that was the profile. That was the person that he was looking for because that was the person or people that were breaking in the area. Unfortunately, Trayvon was not one of those people. Trayvon had every right to be in that community. Trayvon had every right to go to the store and come back in peace and safe. So I think that's really a joke. I don't understand why she wouldn't see that, but then again, there's the disconnect.
And there also seems to be a disconnect between what Fox News broadcasts and the truth, and what may have been the most dishonest part of this Fox News analysis of President Obama's remarks came when Fox News anchor Gregg Jarrett claimed he didn't want to misrepresent what the president said, and then he went on to misrepresent what the president said about the verdict in the case, which he then followed with a clip of the president complaining that African Americans get frustrated when the context of their experience of racism is denied, except Fox News cut out the 3.5 minutes in which President Obama described that context, as you can see in this clip.
And I want to play a soundbite here. I don't want to misrepresent what the president said, but he did repeat the sentiment of African Americans that had the roles been reversed, had the teenager been white, the aftermath and the outcome, I presume he's talking about the verdict, would have been different. Here it is, and I'll get your thoughts on the other side.
Folks understand the challenges that exist for African-American boys. But they get frustrated, I think, if they feel that there's no context for it, and that context is being denied. And that all contributes, I think, to a sense that if a white male teen was involved in the same kind of scenario, that from top to bottom, both the outcome and the aftermath might have been different.
Now, people can judge for themselves what the president is doing there, but some will interpret that, Chris, as the president of the United States giving voice to the notion that the shooting was racially motivated, and had Trayvon Martin been white, it wouldn't have happened, or at the very least, there would have been a different jury verdict if no trial at all.
So not only did supposedly straight news anchor Gregg Jarrett misrepresent what the president said there about how the outcome might have been different into saying the verdict would have been different, but the clip of President Obama Fox News showed there began with his complaint that African Americans get frustrated when the context of their experience of racism is denied, except Fox News cut out the 3.5 previous minutes in which President Obama described that context, even though it was an extraordinary moment in American history and one of the most powerful parts of the speech to hear the President of the United States describe his personal experience with racism to provide the context Fox News cut out here.
There are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me. There are very, very few African American men who haven't had the experience of walking across the street and hearing the locks click on the doors of cars. That happens to me, at least before I was a senator. There are very few African Americans who haven't had the experience of getting on an elevator and a woman clutching her purse nervously and holding her breath until she had a chance to get off. That happens often. And I don't want to exaggerate this, but those sets of experiences inform how the African American community interprets what happened one night in Florida. And it's inescapable for people to bring those experiences to bear. The African American community is also knowledgeable that there is a history of racial disparities in the application of our criminal laws. Everything from the death penalty to enforcement of our drug laws. And that ends up having an impact in terms of how people interpret the case. Now, this isn't to say that the African American community is naive about the fact that African American young men are disproportionately involved in the criminal justice system, that they're disproportionately both victims and perpetrators of violence. It's not to make excuses for that fact, although black folks do interpret the reasons for that in a historical context. They understand that some of the violence that takes place in poor black neighborhoods around the country is born out of a very violent past in this country, and that the poverty and dysfunction that we see in those communities can be traced to a very difficult history. And so the fact that sometimes that's unacknowledged adds to the frustration. And the fact that a lot of African American boys are painted with a broad brush, and the excuse is given, well, there are these statistics out there that show that African American boys are more violent. Using that as an excuse to then see sons treated differently causes pain. I think the African American community is also not naive in understanding that statistically, somebody like Trayvon Martin was probably statistically more likely to be shot by a peer than he was by somebody else. So folks understand the challenges that exist for African American boys. But they get frustrated, I think, if they feel that there's no context for it.
So that's the context that Fox News cut out from right before the clip of President Obama they misrepresented. And for the grand finale, Fox News' digital politics editor Chris Stirewalt then went on to misrepresent what President Obama said right after the clip Fox News showed, claiming that all of Obama's talk about race means he supports filing federal charges against George Zimmerman, as you can see here.
Right, and remember that we have ongoing here in Washington and down in Florida an investigation by the Justice Department to recheck the work of state law enforcement down there and looking for a civil rights component. The only way that you can really get the Justice Department involved down there is if Attorney General Eric Holder and his team make a conclusion that there was a racial inequity here because a Hispanic man killed a black teenager, whether it was found to be in self-defense or not. If it is deemed to be a racial matter or racially charged in some way, it opens the door for federal intervention. The president certainly seemed to be leaning in that direction in those comments.
Of course, President Obama seemed to be leaning against federal charges in exactly the opposite direction Chris Stirewalt claimed there, which was pretty clear from what President Obama said in the part of his remarks right after the clip Fox News showed that you can see here.
I think it's understandable that there have been demonstrations and vigils and protests, and some of that stuff is just going to have to work its way through as long as it remains nonviolent. If I see any violence, then I will remind folks that that dishonors what happened to Trayvon Martin and his family. But beyond protests or vigils, the question is, are there some concrete things that we might be able to do? I know that Eric Holder is reviewing what happened down there, but I think it's important for people to have some clear expectations here. Traditionally, these are issues of state and local government. The criminal code and law enforcement is traditionally done at the state and local levels.
So President Obama certainly didn't seem to be leaning in the direction of federal charges there, which means that in less than 5 minutes of broadcast time, Fox News falsely claimed Obama was leaning in the direction of federal charges. Fox News misrepresented what Obama said about the verdict. Fox News misrepresented what both the prosecutor and Trayvon Martin's mother said about whether race was an issue in the case, and Fox News edited out the part of Obama's remarks giving the context of his experience with racism right before a clip in which Obama complained that African Americans get frustrated when the context of their experience of racism is denied. Fox News broadcast all that misinformation to support the false narrative that President Obama inappropriately injected the issue of race into this case, and the purpose of that false narrative is to scare Fox News' white viewers, which is race baiting, I think, but I want to know what you think. Was Fox News' false narrative that President Obama inappropriately injected the issue of race into this case meant as race baiting to scare white viewers? And regarding the issue of race in this case, how did race affect the outcome and the aftermath of George Zimmerman's killing of Trayvon Martin?
I YouTube, you decide.